It's time for the Property Podcast, where every week tens of thousands of property investors, new and experienced, join together to get news, knowledge and laughs at our expense. With me, Rob Bence.
And me, Rob Dix. Join us every Thursday morning for your weekly dose of property ideas and motivation. Then head over to our website at thepropertypodcast.com to keep the conversation going. Now though, let's get started.
Hello everyone and welcome to episode 99, oh so close, of the Property Podcast. Hi, I'm Rob B and with me as always is Rob D. Good morning, Rob. How are we?
For the 99th time, good morning, Rob. Really well, thank you. We're just going to be in some kind of slump of depression after episode 100. We've been building it up so much. This is going to be a good one. This is part 3 of How to Become a Property Investor, the final part in our 3-part series. This is going to be getting down to the nuts and bolts of actually getting that first investment. We've talked about the big concepts. Now we're going to get down to grassroots, as well as a news story and a pretty old school resource of the week, I've got to say. But it might just help you out of a sticky spot at some point. So all of that coming up in episode 99.
So, yes, we've talked about episode 100 a lot, but this is a big episode in itself. It's the final part of How to Become a Property Investor. But before we go into it, we've definitely got to talk about what we've done this week, because we've been prepping a lot for episode 100. And episode 100 isn't just a property podcast episode, it's so much more. If you followed this for a while, you know we've been working on a book with many other property investors, and that book is called Property Investment Tips. And next week we launch it, hooray! Wow, so much work's gone into it. Rob and his wife Mish have done an amazing job putting it all together, editing it. It's going to be a great, great book. We've been contacting people who've contributed to the book as well. The design work's done, the marketing plan's done. There's so much. It's unbelievable, Rob. I know you've done books before, but I didn't realise. I kind of knew it wasn't easy, but I didn't realise how much work went into getting a book off the ground.
It is not easy. There's lots of, you write it and you think, done, brilliant. And then there's all these millions of other things and you realise you actually only just started. But the actual writing part of this was something I've never done before, because it's been a collaboration between, I think, about 30 people in the end, because we've both contributed to it, as have all our guest bloggers from the Property Hub, as have lots of members of the Property Hub as well. So we just put out an open call for people who wanted to submit their tips, because we wanted this to be a really wide-ranging book, because we talk about a lot on this podcast, but we only have our own particular viewpoint, our own experiences to draw on, and we wanted to have a whole range of different views. So in the end, I think 30 different people have contributed to these 100 tips. And so it's been brilliant putting that together. It's really special that we're putting it out to coincide with episode 100 of this podcast. And it's the podcast which led to the Property Hub, which has become in the last year this fantastic community. And the book is kind of the product of that community. So it's really special to us in lots of different ways. And it's also just a really useful book. So that's coming out next week on the same day as episode number 100. And big announcement, it's going to be free for the first 5 days. We can't make it free forever because Amazon won't let us. We'd like to, but we can't. But for the first 5 days, it's going to be completely free. After that, it's not exactly going to be pricey. So if you're listening to this late, do not worry. We're going to keep it as cheap as we possibly can. We're basically doing it at cost. But for the first 5 days, it's going to be free. So we're going to send you a reminder email if you're a member of the Property Hub, so you don't miss out, but just keep an eye on it so you can get in there and grab it when it's free. And once you've picked it up and read it and hopefully enjoyed it, we would love your support in spreading the word. And so we're going to let you know how you can help us out with that as well. Really, really exciting. It's been a busy week, but an exciting one.
It certainly has. It certainly has. And it's been a busy week in the world of property too, Rob. London in particular, a couple of interesting news stories. First up, the former home of JFK in London and homes next to it are being all knocked down, or hoping to get planning to do this apparently, knock it all down and build the most expensive home in London. It's an incredible project. The links, of course, will be in the show notes, which are thepropertyhub.net/how to become a property investor. Go to the show notes and you can see the news story for this. But they reckon the price tag will be around just a cool 300 million. So, the London property market, it's obviously doing all right. But not according to our other news story in The Guardian, which talks about Foxtons. Now, Foxtons is the biggest estate agent in London, and their sales have taken a big slide towards the end of last year. Now, Foxtons do all levels in the market, not just the top end, middle or bottom. They do all over. So to see that slide could be the first indicator that we might see prices tailing off slightly in London over the coming months, because they're not on the land registry yet. So we'll see. But very interesting data there. So really two different stories in the same city. One talking about a home for the super mega rich, and one saying, well, actually, the general market isn't kicking on as much as it used to. Definitely one to keep an eye on. We talked about London a lot in our property predictions podcast. If you haven't listened to that, it was done a few weeks ago. Definitely go and check that out. But we'll definitely be following this news story over the coming months.
Yeah, it is a really interesting one. And even though you do have the kind of the changes to the stamp duty and the prospect of a mansion tax and things which might clobber the high end of London is still such a big part of it and has such big swings in the market. So it possibly does obscure what's happening in the market at large. And perhaps these Foxtons results are giving us more into an insight in what's happening in the market more broadly. I was speaking to an estate agent in South London the other day who was saying that things were just absolutely crazy at the start of last year and over the summer. But then in the last couple of months of the year and the start of this year, things have been way quieter. So it seems like London is slowing down, certainly in terms of activity. But you do have to kind of start digging around in different sources to get to the root of what's going on, because it is such a big and complicated market.
It is. It's huge. But that could be another whole topic in itself. And maybe after episode 100, it will be. But we've got a big topic to do this week, Rob. And it's our final part in the 3-part series of how to become a property investor. And this week, it's really putting it all together and going out and getting that first investment.
Yeah, exactly. So all the things we've talked about only really become useful once you start taking action on it, right? So we've talked about how to decide if it's for you, all the big issues around it. Then we went down into the things that you had to understand, the key concepts like yield and inflation and all that kind of thing. And that's all really interesting, but it's only any good if you're going to put it into action. And so hopefully by now you've decided that it is for you. It is something you want to do. Last week's episode got you excited about why it was such a brilliant thing to be doing for your long-term wealth. And so now it's time to go out and find that first investment, buy it and get it tenanted. So when you're doing that, if you're doing it for the first time, there's going to be a lot of things you're unfamiliar with. Even if you've bought your own house in the past to live in, there are going to be different parts to the process. And I think that's easy for us to forget as people who've done it many times. And Rob, you're someone who's been involved in hundreds and possibly thousands of sales. And so it's possibly easy to get a bit blasé about it. But we're going to break it down and talk about all the different parts of the process, finding it, getting it financed, doing all the legals, then getting it let. So let's start with finding that first deal, shall we? Getting the first one right is really important and can be a bit scary.
It can be. You're right, Rob. I try not to be blasé because I do know the first property investment you'll ever do will be the hardest. Not because you've got to necessarily do more work, it's just emotionally harder. So by following these steps and trying to reduce the emotion, hopefully you'll do well. And you're right, you've got to find a property in the first place. And the first thing we're going to look at is fundamentals. Now, if you're new to the podcast, you've been recommended this because of this 3-part series. If you start listening back, you might hear us maybe once or twice mention fundamentals, maybe a bit more.
Possibly 3 times.
But fundamentals are so important when it comes to property investment. What do we mean by fundamentals? It's really the core things that make up a good investment. We're looking for transport links. We're looking for good transport links. We're looking for good schools, shops in the area, investment, employment. There's so much. The list goes on and on and on. But all the obvious things you would think of, you need to look for. What some people do is they just look for what they think is a cheap property. But the area may be so-so. It's got good transport links, but employment's pretty weak. Or the rents seem pretty high and there's good demand, but it's in the middle of nowhere. Or it's relying on a single industry. There's lots of things that can make the fundamentals weaker. You want to tick as many boxes as you can. You want it all. You want the transport links. You want the high employment. You want investment going into the area. You want shops locally. You want the schools. You want it all. Be greedy when it comes to fundamentals, because that will ensure that not only will you get a tenant first time round, but you will continue to get tenants. Because if the fundamentals are there, then tenants will be there. Don't go weak on your fundamentals. Don't sacrifice the fundamentals for what you think could be a good deal elsewhere. So once you've nailed the fundamentals, the next thing you really want to strive to achieve is buying below market value. Now, below market value, sometimes referred to as BMV, gets spouted around a lot in property investment. And actually, we've got a course on the Property Hub that we'll link to. So remember, the show notes for this are the propertyhub.net/how to become an investor. We'll link to a course that's free on the Property Hub, and it's about buying below market value. But essentially, you want to get money off the value, not the asking price, the value. So if someone says, this property's worth 100 and you get it for 80, then that might be a great deal. But you need to check it's worth 100, not just because someone says it. You need to validate that, do your research. And if you come to the conclusion that, yes, it is worth 100 and you can get it for 80, that's an incredible deal. You should definitely go ahead if the fundamentals are there too. So buying below market value with fundamentals are really the key to property investment success. Easy to say, BMV, slightly harder to do. So make sure you go and follow that course because you'll learn a lot. It's definitely, a whole episode on the podcast, a whole course of content there. So go and watch that course. Once you've got a property investment with the right fundamentals and below market value, you need to make sure it's right for your strategy. So we've talked about strategy in the previous couple of podcasts. And again, it's worth mentioning because you shouldn't just go, well, that's a good deal, let's buy it. It might be a good deal, but is it a good deal for you? Does it match your strategy? So if you've got a goal, and let's say your goal is to retire from property investments in 10 years using standard professional lets, then if your property comes on the market and it's a property in an area that's probably going to attract LHA tenants, so tenants on benefits, then that's not really fitting your strategy. You're being seduced by the deal rather than what you've laid out in your strategy. So be careful of that. That's why the strategy is so important. It helps you keep your focus. So make sure the deal is right for your strategy. It may be a great deal, but is it a great deal for you? Okay, and then to continue on with that theme, make sure the rental demand's there. Now, we've talked about that in the fundamentals, but the fundamentals all stack up. But just make sure that you're right, all those fundamentals are there, but don't just go, all the fundamentals are there, the rental demand must be. Go and check with the local letting agents. Make calls. Now, you can do this in a simple way by just checking on Rightmove and seeing how many properties are there and how long they've been sticking. But actually, by making that call and saying, right, I've got a property coming onto the market in this area, or I'm thinking about buying a property in this area, what do you think it's going to let for? And get their opinion. Now, if you want to be sneaky, call back as a prospective tenant as well. Maybe not 5 minutes later, but maybe in a few days' time. Call back and go, I'm looking at letting a property, this type of property. What do you think it'll let for? Because you might get a different number, because they might tell what a landlord a bigger number and a prospective tenant a lower number. So then a real number might be somewhere in the middle. So you can check on demand and rental prices that way. So to recap, when you're finding your property, look for the fundamentals, go for below market value, make sure it's right for your strategy, and make sure there's a rental demand. Now, where to find those properties is a big subject as well. Now, there's lots of different ways. There's auctions, there's property investment companies, there's estate agents, the list goes on. You can find out all about that in the BMV course, so I suggest you go to that.
Yeah, definitely. That course will be a great starting point to seeing what options you've got available to you when you're actually looking for avenues to finding the property. And then when you're looking at potential properties, the factors that Rob's just run through are going to be critical to making sure that this is going to be a viable investment. But let's say you found the property now. You found something that looks like it's going to be a contender. It could be investment number one. So how are you going to finance it? The obvious way is going to be using a mortgage. You could, if you're lucky enough to have cash in the bank, just use cash and buy it outright. But then you'll be missing out on the benefits of leverage, which is something we talked about in part 2 last week. So let's assume for now that you are using a mortgage, because it's the most common way of financing a property. It's what most people do. And it's where the most confusion is, because if it's something you haven't done before, there's a lot to know. There's a lot of terminology. There's a lot of variables. The way through that whole minefield is to use a broker. And this is something we talk about a lot. We talk about the importance of building a team. And it's something that's going to be a theme through this episode as well, because it just makes your life so much easier, because you're not going to know everything at this stage. You're never going to know everything, but at this stage you're going to know less than you ever are. And if you've got people to lean on who can to help you out with these things, it all becomes a lot easier. A broker is a key part of that process for reasons we'll come on to in a minute. But something that often gets asked is how to know whether you'll be able to get a mortgage. So at the point that you go out and you find a property and then you think, okay, well, now I have to find out if I can get it financed. Actually, what you can do is do some of the work in advance by speaking to your broker. Maybe you're in the early stages of going out and looking for a property, but you haven't found the one yet. But at that stage, you can start talking to a broker and get their opinion, and you can get them to do something called a DIP, which is a decision in principle. This is where they'll go to a lender and tell them all your circumstances. So there's no property in the picture yet. They're just looking at you as a client. And the lender will say yes or no in principle to lending to you. What this means is it gives you a couple of advantages. First of all, it reassures you that you are actually going to be able to get a mortgage and you're not wasting your time. And second of all, it puts you in a bit of a stronger position when you're going out and negotiating for the property, because it gives the vendor some kind of certainty that the deal's going to go through. One of the advantages to buying in cash, as we've said before, is that it means that you're likely to be able to negotiate a better deal because you can move faster and you can give the vendor some certainty. The next best thing is to have a DIP because it shows that you are actually mortgageable. And when it comes to buy-to-let mortgages, it is about you and your circumstances and your income and your credit very much as well as the property. The property is a factor as well, of course, but the majority of the time you are going to be one of the main barriers. So getting that DIP kind of gets you over that hurdle, and how the broker can do that for you. Why is it so important to have a broker? Why can't you do it all yourself? Well, so many reasons. One of them just being the fact of how long it takes to do it yourself. Also, the best rate when it comes to mortgage isn't always the best deal. So there are so many factors as well as the headline rate. There's things like the arrangement fee, there's early redemption fees, there's the rate that it reverts to afterwards. There are all these factors. And not only is it hard to actually mathematically work out which is going to be cheaper over the period of a number of years, but also a good broker, if you tell them your strategy, they'll be able to find an appropriate product for your needs rather than just going for the cheapest. So the cheapest might not be the best in your particular scenario. You will probably be looking at an interest-only mortgage. This is something we've talked about before as well. Interest-only mortgages protect your cash flow, which is really, really important. We talked about that last week. And they have some tax advantages. And it also doesn't mean that you can't pay off all your properties by later in life if that's what you want to do. If you particularly want to go for capital repayment, there are people who swear by doing that. That might be right for you, but the majority of investors go interest only. But again, that's a conversation that you can have with a good broker. So hopefully you're seeing why a mortgage is a really important part of the process, because the mortgage is the key to leverage, and the key to getting the right mortgage is a broker. So by now you've found the property, you've got finance arranged on it. If you then manage to get an offer accepted and go ahead with the purchase, that's when another complicated and potentially frustrating area comes in. That's the legals of actually getting the deal done.
Yeah, you're right, Rob. Frustrating is a great word to use. The legals can be a little dull and actually take away from the excitement of the deal. 'Cause think about it. You're finding a deal, that's exciting. You're putting an offer in, that's exciting. You'll get your finance arranged. It's still exciting because you're working, it all affects your numbers. Then you get to legals, and often it really slows down. Because you can hire the best legal team, the best solicitor for your conveyancing there is. But if the seller's solicitor is rubbish, well, that's how the process is going to be. It's going to be rubbish because it takes two sides to make a good deal. What I would say to begin with is because of that, and because the majority of conveyancing solicitors I've worked with, and I work with a lot, and I've only found a few to be good, because the majority are rubbish, there you go, I said it, they're expected to go slow. It is, I'm sorry, I know there's going to be solicitors listening, you clearly are the good ones, it's the ones who aren't listening. The process goes slow. It really does. It is so frustrating sometimes because you can get everything ready and be prepared, but then suddenly, the process comes to a grinding halt because the seller solicitor hasn't sent something back or is slow to respond to questions. So be prepared for this part to go slow. In an ideal world, it might go through in like 4 weeks. But unfortunately, property isn't always an ideal world, and it can slow right up. And that's why I said be prepared is important. Don't let the process slow down because of you. Make sure you've got all your documents in order before you go forward. And it's worth checking with your solicitor what they're going to require from you. So often it's ID. You'll need to sign to say you want to work with them. But find out what's going to come up as well. So you're not delaying the process at any point. So have that conversation very early on. What do you need to get started and what are you going to require from me further down the line? Make sure you have that conversation, especially if you're new and you don't know what to expect, because they will then guide you and say, right, get all these documents ready for me. Work with a solicitor who already works with investors. Now, I remember the first property deal I ever did. I just looked at the price and went, wow, that's cheap. Let's use them. And they were what I would call a mum and pop solicitors. They were on the high street. They, I walked past them on my way to the train every day. I thought, yeah, I'll go with those. Went in to see them. Was like, speaking to a solicitor, my first property. All very exciting. They were probably still today the slowest in over 10 years of property, 9 years since I bought my first property. The slowest solicitors I've ever used. Make sure that you're not just picking one that's convenient. Pick one that works with investors regularly. Ask for recommendations. Ask in a property hub, go on the forum there. Ask Rob and I, we're contactable too. If you want a good solicitor, ask us, and they will make the process so much better. But remember, they can be great, but if the seller solicitor isn't, they can't do much about that except jolly them along. Now remember, your legal team, you may have got all this far and they may advise you to pull out the deal because they're not happy with it. Something isn't quite right. The seller solicitor isn't budging. Sometimes you can feel pot committed to a deal. You feel, well, I've come this far. Maybe I'll just compromise on that and hope it works out for the best. Don't. I know it's frustrating, all that work and effort you've put in and then it doesn't happen. I've done it with clients at RMP. Multiple investors have invested. Hours and hours and hours of work have gone into putting the deal together, getting everybody ready, and then something's not been right legals and we've pulled out. It's painful. I can't tell you how painful it is. But take the pain, because that short-term pain is much better than the long-term pain you're going to suffer by accepting weak legal terms.
Yeah, definitely. And a good solicitor should be able to, they won't be able to tell you what to do, but they'll be able to be pragmatic about it and give you the key issues. Because in lots of deals, there'll be something where you're not sure about. Often if there's a lease involved, there'll be one term which just looks a little bit funny. And, if this might come back down the line. But then if you're going to wait for the absolutely perfect deal, you're never going to get anywhere. So some solicitors tend to be really pessimistic and always feel like they just don't want you to do anything because then there's a risk that it will go wrong. But then you definitely don't want someone who goes too far the other way and just goes, yeah, it'll all be fine. Because the reason you've got someone doing this for you and you're not doing it yourself is because they're going to be able to spot things that you never would. So a good solicitor will be able to be realistic, they'll be able to keep things moving, and they'll be able to get the deal done. A bad solicitor will kill the deal by either obstructing it and frustrating the other party, or just talking you out of it. So finding a good solicitor is not easy, but when you have, be nice to them, because it's a really important part of the team. Okay, so assuming you've got through that process unscathed, the final part of the whole process is getting it let. And this is the best part because this is the part that ends up with money hitting your bank account every month. And that is really exciting. When your first rent payment comes in, that's really nice, especially as you'll have just had a couple of months of lots of random amounts of money going out of your bank account. And it's like, oh, okay, arrangement fee. Oh, okay, solicitor fee, search fee, all these fees you didn't know about. But then finally money starts coming in and that's great. So getting it let. Should you do it yourself? Think carefully about it. Think about the amount of time it's going to take you to do. If it's a process that you want to go through and you're willing to put in the time and it makes sense for you, that's great. You can absolutely do it yourself. But it's not something to do just because you want to save a few quid. Because firstly, you'll think about the cost of your time. And secondly, you might end up costing yourself a lot of money if you get something wrong. Because legally, there are lots of things that you have to get right and it can go horribly wrong. There are so many issues that could end up coming back and biting you and costing you a lot of money that you wouldn't have been aware of. So if you are going to do it yourself, that's fine, but go into it with eyes open and be willing to do the learning that's required. If you decide to use a letting agent instead, don't rush into that process. I'm going to link to a really great post on the Property Hub by a letting agent himself who actually tells you how to find a letting agent and some of the things to ask them. You don't want to go for the one with the nicest offices who offers you a cup of tea when you walk in. You don't want to go for the one that seems to be quoting the cheapest price. You need to find the one that's actually going to do their job effectively. So this is not a process that you want to rush. So ideally, start it a little bit earlier so you're not sitting, you don't wait until you've got the keys to the property before you start this process, because then you'll feel like you need to rush just to get the property let. And of course, Yellow Lettings is available. Yellowlettings.net is our letting agency. You can take.
Who was that, Rob? Sorry, I didn't quite get it.
That was Yellow Lettings.
Yellow Lettings, you say?
Yeah. Which
that's enough. Sorry.
We're not going to get into a sales pitch here, but it is an option that you might want to check out. As part of this process, you have to decide whether to rent the property furnished or unfurnished. In the book we've got coming out next week, there's actually a few tips about renting furnished v unfurnished with a few opposing views. So we won't get into that here, but a large factor of that is going to be what the market dictates. Sometimes you're not going to have a choice. It's going to be either the market tends to demand furnished or it doesn't. Also, setting the rent is a factor that's going to be in there as well. And this is somewhere else where you can sort of go back to that research process, those skills that you honed earlier, and start figuring out what the rent should be. Because if you're using a letting agent, they'll be able to give you their view. And if they're good, then they'll be realistic and they'll come up with a rent that's going to maximize your return while not just being crazy ambitious and leaving you with an empty property because no one will pay it. But you can do your own research as well to validate that. Really easy to do. If you're investing in an area where there is a buoyant rental market and there are properties similar to yours, all you have to do is go onto Rightmove, look at properties similar to yours, see what they're renting for. You'll often find that there's a range, normally a fairly narrow range, and you can sort of see where in that you think that yours fits in terms of location, finish, and all the rest of it. Having done that, and you found a tenant, then there is the referencing process. This, again, is something that your agent can take care of for you. But if you're doing it yourself, do not scrimp on the referencing. Get the tenant right, and everything else from that point onwards will be so much easier. Put it another way, if you get the wrong tenant, things can get very expensive and very time consuming. If you either got a bad gut feeling about the tenant or the references are less than perfect, you've just one of those factors is enough to just say no, because you want to make sure you get it right. Even if it means that your property is empty for another 2 weeks at the start, it's still going to be so much better than putting the wrong tenant in place. So whether you're doing it yourself or getting help, get that right. Then the final part of the process is actually managing the tenancy. And again, you can take a view as to whether you want to do this yourself or use an agent. Either way, make sure whoever is doing it is providing a good service to the tenant, because the tenant is the customer. It's the tenant who's paying their rent, which is paying your mortgage and making you your profit. So you want to make sure that they're being well looked after, because when the tenant moves out, there's going to be all kinds of expenses. There's potentially going to be a void period while you find a new tenant, and that's going to cost you a lot more money than whatever it would have cost you to keep the tenant happy in the first place. So management is a part of the picture not to be overlooked. It doesn't have to be complicated. It doesn't have to be time consuming, but it's worth getting it right.
Okay, so it appears that getting your first property, there's a bit of work involved, but that's why there's a whole podcast episode on it. So this makes your life easier. You know what to expect. You know what to do. To sort of wrap up this section of the podcast now, remember that your first deal won't be the best deal you ever do. I promise you that will be the case. You'll look back in 5-10 years' time and go, why did I do that one? Because you'll learn so much. It's not that it'll be a pig of an investment. It just won't be the best because you'll get better each time. You know, you'll learn lessons. You'll learn different techniques. You'll learn better negotiation tactics. Learn better people to work with. There are so many things you'll learn along the way. So don't worry if your first investment's not perfect. Remember, you're not looking for a perfect investment. You're looking for very good.
Yeah, and in assessing what very good means, make sure the numbers work for you. So first of all, make sure the fundamentals are in place and it's lettable, because if you can't rent the property out, all the numbers are just fantasy. But assuming you can, just make sure the numbers work. So the ones to look out for, we've talked about before, you want to look out for the ROI, because that will show you how hard your money is ultimately working compared to other investments you could make. And also the cash flow, because however much capital growth there might be in the future and however exciting that is, if you've got a property that's costing you money every month, that is not a good situation to be in. So keep an eye on the cash flow. And to do that, make sure you're realistic about the numbers. Don't try and talk yourself into a deal. It might be taking you a while to find the first one. If you're in a very competitive market, it might be a struggle to find something where it all adds up. And it's easy to just try and force something through and sort of like massage the numbers a little bit to try and make it work. Or to get into a negotiation and end up paying too much. Don't do that. Make sure the numbers work, and then you'll end up with what Rob was just talking about, what might not be the greatest deal of all time, but at least something that's going to give you an easy time and going to put money in your pocket.
Definitely. Now remember, when you're looking on the internet, there's a lot of weird and wonderful property strategies out there. And they're weird and wonderful because they are complex. And the reason why people are promoting them is because they can sell courses around them, because they are so complex. Don't be seduced by that marketing material, or necessarily don't feel like you have to be anyway for your first investment. You know, the latest rent-to-rent with a twist of HMO and a slice of lease options to go on top, all mixed together, makes this new formula which will make you millions in 6 months. Put the brakes on. Those schemes, while they sound fantastic, they tell you you can get all of this big prize with all this little investment in. But remember, a lot of these schemes are a lot harder to do than they are to sell courses on. You know, the courses are there because it's hard. Remember that. It'll take a lot of time. Traditional property investment is a great way to get started. It's all I've ever done. It's all I've ever done. And I'm very happy with it because I don't spend any time on my portfolio. And that's what I want. As you've probably heard, Rob and I do a few little bits and pieces on the side of the podcast. So time is low. So I don't want to be dedicating time to my portfolio. So by doing traditional buy-to-let properties really works for me. It may be different for you. What works for me may be different for you. And what works for me may be different for Rob. And what works for me now may be different in the future. Remember that. What people tell you this is the best strategy. It may be the best strategy for them, but is it the best strategy for you? List what's important to you and see if your strategy matches up to that.
Yeah, for sure. And remember that although you will hit some sticking points in this process, undoubtedly, at some point during the process that we've talked through in this episode, you'll find 1 or 2 points where you're just like, oh, God, this is really hard. I don't know what to do next. Or should I do this? Should I do that? Remember that ultimately you're going to look back afterwards and wonder what all the fuss was about. The first one is the hardest. It's the scariest. You're dealing with large amounts of money. It's not an easy thing to do. Most people never do it. But you will look back and think, well, why did I get stressed about that? I get it now. This is fine. And then you'll have got the bug. You'll be straight on to the next one. And hopefully you'll keep going and going and going. So I hope you found this episode and indeed this series useful. You'll find the show notes for all 3 episodes, which include links to a whole wealth of stuff that we've put together over the last couple of years at thepropertyhub.net/how-to-become-a-property-investor.
So, wowza, what a bumper series that's been. Remember, Rob's giving you a link there. Don't be shy. It's not just the links from this episode, it's the links from all 3 episodes. So, lots and lots of content there. Thank you for listening to the series, but you'll know now, if this is the 3rd one you've listened to, if you started off with this series, that we give you a resource of the week every week, and it's one of the most popular parts of the podcast. Our resource of the week this week, Rob, was respectable in the 80s. Yes, it's a fax facility. Now, you may be going, wait there, hold on, Rob and Rob, aren't you cutting edge technology? But there's a reason for this, and let me explain what it is. The website is called freefax2email.net. It'll be linked to the show notes, so don't worry about writing it down now. But this app, this piece of software online, you go on there and you can email a fax to someone. Why would you want to do that? Well, believe it or not, if you're doing a refurb project or you're dealing with suppliers in property, there's quite a lot of them, worryingly so, that don't have email facilities. I know. I found it hard to believe too. Dale, who works in the RMP property office, he was working with contractors and he couldn't believe it when they said they didn't have email facility and they only work by fax. We didn't have a fax machine, surprisingly, because we're not living in the 80s. But because some of our suppliers are, we've used this tool and it's free to send faxes to people. So we email our fax to them, they receive it, it works fine, it's free, it's a great tool. So maybe not a resource that you're going to use day in, day out, but if you are involved in property, then at some point this may be useful to you. So we'll link to it in the show notes, but quite a classic resource there.
Yeah, next week's resource of the week, a guide to training your carrier pigeon. But it does still come up. There's been a couple of occasions in the past where someone's asked me to send them a fax, and I've had to sort of find a way around it and sort of explain to them that this is a ludicrous thing to ask. But at some point, I won't be able to talk my way out of it. And to get out of a jam, that looks like it's going to be a really useful service. So bookmark that one for that one occasion when you're going to need it, because it might just save your skin.
Yeah, and we can rip into these people because there's no way, if they're using fax machines, they've heard of podcasts. That would just blow their mind. Pod what? Yeah, God, yeah. Wait until you hear about the internet. Right, next. Review of the week, and thank you so much for keeping these in. This is short but sweet, but it's a great one. It's from Andrew, and it says, great podcast. This is a fantastic podcast. It's been helpful, engaging, and full of useful advice. The two Robs are very informative and great to listen to. Thank you, Andrew. If you're enjoying the show, you can of course leave us a review on iTunes. But actually, if you're going to leave us one review, we'd love you to get behind the book. As we said, it's free to begin with, then it'll be only sold at cost. You know, this isn't profit making. Please, there's so many people who've put this book together, so much time and effort that's gone into it. So if you get your hands on a copy and you enjoy it, we'd love a review. It will make a big difference to us, and we read every one. So if you can get behind the book when it launches next week, next Thursday, we'd be uber grateful.
Yep, and next Thursday's episode 100, we're going to just hyperventilate for half an hour. No, we're going to have a really great episode, and it's going to be based around the book, 100 Property Investment Tips. It's going to be another great episode. We love recording every single one of these. We hope you enjoy listening to them as well. We're going to try and make episode number 100 as special as it deserves to be.
We certainly will. So this wraps up our 3-part series now. Remember, an absolute catalogue of information at thepropertyhub.net/how to become a property investor. Next week, we're not easing off. It's the book launch. It's going to be huge. It's going to be exciting. We're going to have a little party on the airwaves. Look forward to being with you then. Remember, if you listen to this please get behind the book, Property Investment Tips. Search for it on Amazon. It's free for the first 5 days. But until our celebration, our party, our episode 100, our book launch next week, you can tell we're getting excited already. Oh, thank you so much for listening, and we'll join you then. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thanks for listening to The Property Podcast. Make sure you join our mailing list at thepropertypodcast.com.
And remember, we love 5-star reviews. Rob even loves them more than air miles.